Yeah, hello, folks. You're welcome to Inspiration with Lanre. And in this particular podcast series, I'll be talking and encouraging you about the law of intentionality. I actually learned something about the law of intentionality a few years ago. And after somebody spoke, and I decided to actually look out for how this law plays out. So I've tried it a couple of times on friends and on my students. For example, you may have gone through a particular path and you several times and you may not have noticed certain object. It could be a tree, it could be a building, it could be a picture on the wall. But the first time you notice that, you will begin to see that each time you pass that particular path. So basically, like someone said, what you are not intentionally looking for, you will not find. And that is absolutely true. We're talking about real value here, something of eternal value. What you are not intentionally looking for, you will not find. And I also find something amazing in physics. While we were in school, that in secondary school, there is this law called the Newton's, first law of motion. And that law is so amazing and it's so express in explanation. It says that action or all bodies continue in a state of rest or of uniform motion in a straight line unless the body is compelled by some external force. Essentially, nothing in life just happens. Growth doesn't just happen. Progress doesn't just happen. We have to be intentional in setting the balls of progress, setting the balls of growth, setting the ball of excellence to roll. For example, personal growth is an area that we need to be intentional about. And I'm actually going to be focusing on that as an example of an area where you need to be intentional. Like I've said earlier, what you are not intentionally looking for, you will not find. Personal growth is not an option, so to say. Personal growth is not something that comes natural. You have to put in an intentional effort in order for you to be able to grow in every area of your life. We talk about spiritual growth, we talk about financial growth, we talk about physical growth. I mean, take an example. If you don't develop your muscle, no matter how much you eat, your muscle stay flaccid. Those who go to the gym and build up their muscles, they do it intentionally. And because of the work the muscles have gone through, the muscles becomes transformed. The same way in your growth, personal growth, professional growth, spiritual growth, financial growth, all these have to be cultivated intentionally. John Maxwell, in one of his books, The Invaluable Law of Growth, actually did a very good job on the law of intentionality. He actually provided a few growth gaps that is very critical for us to consider. John Maxwell talks about the assumption gap. I mean, why people won't be intentional. What are those limitations, those barriers that stops us from being intentional in all that we do. It talks about one, the assumption gap. Oh, I assume that I will just grow. That assumption gap is a very dangerous gap. The knowledge gap. And sometimes we feel that, oh, I need to know certain thing before I grow. It is in seeking that knowledge that growth will come. So a lot of people have limited themselves because they felt that there are certain things they do not know. But I think that growth comes when you go out of your way, you go out of your share to seek answer, and definitely you will find answers. The more answers you find, the better you become, and the greater or the the more qualitative, yes, I was getting it well, qualitative your growth will be. He also talked about the timing gap. People will talk about it is not the right time to start this business. It is not the right time to take this course. It is not the right time to get married. It is not the right time to do this. It is not the right time to do that. The timing gap actually prevents people from getting intentional. Another gap is the mistake gap. Oh, I'm afraid. I'm afraid. I'm afraid. Fear is false evidence appearing real. The mistake gap. The fifth gap is the perfection gap. Oh, I have to find the best way to do it before I can start. Oh, I have to find the best way around this before I start. Oh, I have to be able to do this thing better before I start. The perfection gap. If you wait for the perfect time, you will never get anything done. In fact, the book of Proverbs said, whosoever waits for the perfect season will never be able to plant. That is very critical to examine. Another gap is the inspiration gap. Or you're not self motivated. And so you're waiting for somebody on the outside to come and inspire you before you go ahead. You need to fill that gap. Men who have done great things, go and ask them. Initially, they didn't feel like doing it. In fact, those who tread the path of excellence will let you know that most times they didn't feel like doing it, but you did it anyway because it's worth it. So you may not feel like reading your books, you may not feel like advancing yourself, but you need to do it all the same. Feelings are very deceptive. So if you are waiting for the time that you feel like doing the right thing before you do the right thing, then you may be slamming the door against your growth. The comparison gap is the seventh gap. Oh, I'm not as good as they are. Oh, they are all better than I am. All these will limit your power of intentionality. And the last gap is the expectation gap. Oh, I thought it would be better than this. Oh, I thought my salary would be better than this. Oh, I thought by now I would have been earning better. The expectation gap can prevent you from getting intentional. And this is very key. This is very critical. So, folks, I'm encouraging you that in all you do, it is very important that you are intentional. I am intentional in the things that I do. I'm talking to you now, I'm doing it intentionally. I'm making this podcast. This is midnight. It's because I'm intentional about it. So I stay, awake to do this podcast. That is an example of being intentional. It's not easy. I need to catch with sleep, but I just have to intentionally stay awake and do something tangible and create impact. Impact won't come easy. If you do what everyone does, you will get the result everyone gets. But if you intentionally do something special, you will get a special result. If you intentionally create a path of exploit, you will intentionally get an exploit size result. I will see you again in my next podcast in this series of the power of intention, where I'm going to be encouraging you on how to make the transition into intentional growth. And I'm going to be referring to John Maxwell's book on the 15 invaluable laws of growth. I'll see you again. My name is Lanre Oguntoye, the inspirational. See you, folks.